For 75 years, Argonne National Laboratory has accelerated the science and technology that drive U.S. security and prosperity. To celebrate, we're capturing the stories of the people who've made it happen. This is Argonne Voices. This fall, the first group of Walter Massey Fellows will walk through the laboratory doors. The fellowship's namesake, Dr. Walter E. Massey, became the lab's first African American director in the early 1980s. Here, he speaks with the current director, Paul Kearns, about leadership, building a diverse and inclusive workplace, and a lesson involving cheesecake.
Nothing like being the person, at the top, because you set the tone, you set the standards, and everything comes there to that office, which is a source of great joy because you deal with everything. There's no dull moment when you're really at the top of an organization.
Yeah, it took me a while to get comfortable just with everybody looking to me when a conversation would end for a decision. I'm a person that likes a lot of input. I like to solicit ideas. I like a diversity of thought and culture and being involved in the conversation. And so, but at the end, of those conversations, people would look to me, right? They would say, well, what do you want to do, right? Or how should we move forward? Or what's the next step that we should take? And so that took a little while, kind of everybody looking my direction and me feeling comfortable with that.
I found that I had to be very careful about what you say because people look to you. I remember one of the first lunches I went to, a dinner, they had cheesecake for dessert. And I said, oh, I really like this. I really love cheesecake. And I noticed that every time we had a lunch or a dinner, they would serve cheesecake. And I said, wow, that's interesting. That must be a specialty. And I had a secretary named Marie. I said, Marie, cheesecake is very popular here. They seem to serve it all the time. She looked at me and said, don't you know why they serve cheesecake? I said because you said you liked it.
I suspect we're still serving the cheesecake using that same recipe.
Well, the lab has been recognized by Forbes as one of the best places to work in the country. So congratulations on that. But I'm sure a lot goes into that. And one thing I imagine is making it a place that feels inclusive to people from all sorts of backgrounds. So could you say a little about how you work to bring that about?
I was very intentional, actually, following conversations with you, Walter, as to really reaching out to laboratory employees at all levels. And so one of my key efforts here has really been to stay connected, stay engaged, despite being the lab director and often in having a day full of meetings or traveling a lot. I've really worked hard to stay connected with employees. And one way I've done that is through what I call a conversation with Kearns, which is just a way to informally interact with employees. Every 2 weeks, we take an hour. I take an hour out of my schedule and have an open forum with employees. And they come from all walks of life and all different careers at the laboratory, basically. And it's fair game to ask me any question they would like to. And so many times it's program focused. Other times it's really operations focused. Or following the death of the murder of George Floyd last summer, we had a series of conversations really associated with just really how people were feeling about that and what was an appropriate response for the laboratory, what actions should we take. And so I think really being open to that regular conversation with employees, every couple of weeks was really one of the key things that kind of changed the tone or the tenor of the laboratory so that people saw the lab director taking time out to have those conversations. I think that really helped set a different vibe at the lab.
And also I want to thank you and your whole team and everybody involved for creating this fellowship in my name, not so much for me in particular, but I think it highlights to individuals thinking about coming to the lab, the fact that the lab would name as one of its only 2 fellowships after a woman and an African American. I think that's a pretty powerful message.
Yes. Well, it's well deserved. By the way, I know you feel like that's not primary purpose, and it's not. It really is intended to help us attract really talented, diverse, early career employees to the laboratory that are really very effective thought leaders and great scientists. And so we're looking forward to actually welcoming our first Walter E. Massey Fellow in the fall. So quite excited to do that.
This is a story that let's hope never happens again, but it shows you hopefully how far we've come. We were tutoring kids in the neighborhood, African American kids, about 7th, 8th grade. And I invited them to come out to the lab, and I took them out to the lab. I told them I worked at Argonne. They'd never seen it. I explained what it was. And I took them out, and then I took them around my office, and I took them to some of the laboratories. And we were about to leave. I said, "So how did you like it?" They looked at me and was so impressed. "We thought you were a janitor." So I think all these programs we're talking now sort of will make sure, hopefully, that those kinds of things don't happen and that young people in the city don't have to believe that the only black people at the lab are janitors, even though the janitors do a great job. What have you enjoyed most about being director?
One of my most favorite stories as laboratory director is when I got to award three researchers at the laboratory, royalty checks for their work in what's today powering electric vehicles, lithium-ion battery technology, and the development of cathodes that are really being used by many manufacturers today. And those checks were really significant. They were seven figures. And so just sitting down with each one of them and presenting them with that check and a bit of disbelief, listening to their response and just how that might change their plans. And so really special to be able to do that, to recognize employees for their contributions. And, it was a large enough sum of money for each one of them to make a difference. And yet each one of them was so passionate about their science, still are today, that they're going to stick with it. And, one of the things that I find really attractive, and you probably did as well, about being the director, is every day's different.
That's true.
Right? There's a new challenge, new opportunity that comes along and really keeps you in the game, so to speak, keep you actively engaged and just really enjoying the experience.
Argonne Voices is an oral history project, recording the stories behind decades of world-changing science at the laboratory. To learn more about Argonne's 75th anniversary, visit anl.gov.